Hey guys, what's going on? So today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a different video. You're used to my shit talking about everything reality TV and the reality stars. But today I thought I would tell you a little bit about myself and give you any tips if you're thinking about moving within Canada, Ontario to New Brunswick specifically. So here we go. So my husband and I, about 2 years ago, we were living in a tiny condo in Toronto. It was like 600 and something square feet. And we were paying a crazy amount for our mortgage for a shoebox. And we have 2 dogs. I'm always going to be a dog person. So is he. We're always going to have dogs. So we're like, we need a house, right? We don't have any kids at the moment, but animals. We need space for our animals. So we were originally born and raised in Toronto, and it just got way too congested. If you're from the Toronto area, you know it's just busy. It's way too congested. And so this was around the time when the mortgage rates skyrocketed, because we were originally thinking of getting a home in just outside of London, Ontario, and because they were a little cheaper there, and at the time, like, they had a bunch of new construction going on there as well. So beautiful homes for maybe like the 600,000 to 700,000 range. The problem is, if you know, in Canada, when the mortgage rates skyrocketed, that set us back. Even though my husband and I were both making really good money, we weren't pre-approved for anywhere near that amount, which is sad because we also had savings and everything like that. And we're like, what the hell's going on? So that kind of made us reevaluate and see, okay, what are our options? If it was up to my husband, we'd be like in the US somewhere, because housing is also super cheap there. I didn't want to be that far away from my friends and family. You know, it's a 2-hour flight from New Brunswick back to Toronto. And the flights are fairly cheap as well. So there was a few factors that we had to look into, right? Yes, the housing is cheaper, but what are we trading? So number one, you're trading distance from your family and friends. If you can't be away from family and friends, and you're like super attached, then you can't really do well with isolation, at least for a short period of time, then I don't think it's for you. I also struggled myself. I wasn't sure if I could do it, but the compromise for me was, hey, I need a better living situation than I have now. And I'm also not that far away. Spring and summer, very cheap flight. I also just flew out about a month ago. I paid $250 with Flair. And with Flair, you don't get like a checked bag for that price. You get like a carry-on. They are a little stingy because you get a personal bag for free, but your personal bag really is just like a purse. I tried to take a backpack one time to see if I can get away with the free backpack or the free personal bag, whatever. It was way too big, but really it's just like the cubby is like this size to put a personal bag in, which is totally unrealistic. But anyway, that's just any airline. That's just any annoyance type of thing. I personally wouldn't do the drive, although I have contemplated it of like, hey, I can just drive back. You know, you get on the Trans-Canada Highway and you can be there in like 13 to 15 hours, depending how many breaks you take, depending on your speed and all that. I personally do not want to drive through Quebec. I'd rather, than go drive through Quebec. So I also get really nervous around like borders and going through the US, and just, I'm like, you know what? The flight is just always cheaper. I usually have a friend or a family member that can pick me up from the airport, and then we're Gucci from there. So yeah, that is number one. Can you deal with the isolation? You know, you're moving to a brand new place. You might not know people. If you're anything like me and my husband, we did not know anybody out here. And we also bought sight unseen, which is crazy. So I never thought I would be doing that. But, with the situation with Canada, I was like, you know what? I need my house. We got a virtual tour. We really trusted our realtors. We knew them. And so, you know what? it's one of those moments in life, like, let's just do it. And I have not regretted it since, but there are a few things that you should know. So, isolation aside, number one, gas prices are a lot higher in New Brunswick than they are in Ontario. When I say a lot higher, I mean like 10 cents higher than Ontario. So that is one thing that I noticed right off the bat. Number two, you are also going to be paying a little bit more in groceries for a couple reasons. One, they are like certain items are slightly more expensive, like milk. A carton of milk could be like $9. That's not too big of a deal for me because I don't really drink a lot of milk. I try to stay away from dairy, so I use almond milk and like things like that that I just get in bulk from Costco anyway. Um, and then you have your taxes. So taxes are 15% instead of 13% compared to Ontario. So that's one thing that you need to be mindful of. As much as you're going to be saving in housing, you are going to be paying a little bit more when you go to the grocery store, which some people are like, it's not worth the trade, but for me, it is. What else? So you also pay a deposit for certain items that come in like a can. So if you're from Ontario, imagine like when you go to the beer store, you pay that deposit and then you get that deposit back when you take your bottles back to the beer store. That's the same kind of system, except you're getting charged at the grocery store, and then you would just take them back to like a recycling depot situation. Um, yeah, so that's that. For right now, the only thing that I would pay a deposit on that's like the biggest one would be pop. So if you drink a lot of like pop in cans specifically, I would also watch out for like canned corn and things like that. They'll usually charge you the deposit for the canned corn, and it is quite a bit that's added on. It's like $1.20 extra on your bill, right? But you do get that back, and you do get a decent amount back as well. Like I had a normal sized large garbage bag full of like pop cans. I took it back and I got like $9 back for the one bag. So if you're someone that drinks a lot of pop, whatever, you might, pay a lot more at your grocery store, but you're also going to get it back. So it weighs out. They're just trying to get you to recycle out here, right? It's very similar to, I believe, Alberta has the same type of system. Number three, let's talk about healthcare. Everyone is always concerned about the healthcare, and rightfully so, but it also depends on the situation. It's very contextual, right? So I would say if you're someone who, you have like liver disease or kidney disease, or you have some sort of condition that requires a certain type of specialist that we might not have here in New Brunswick, because we are kind of limited when it comes to certain specialists, again, depending on the area out here. So in that case, they're always going to kind of direct you to Toronto. The other thing to know is that if you ever need a transplant or anything like that, like liver, kidney, lung, heart, knock on wood, if you ever need a transplant, it's not going to be in Atlantic Canada, or even, I believe, in the West Coast. I'll have to check on the West Coast, but for the East Coast, they're really just going to direct you to Toronto. So there have been cases that I've heard where people moved out here, a couple years later, unfortunately, someone needed a transplant, and then they have to go back to Toronto temporarily, but that kind of surgery and that kind of recovery time is a really long time. So some people just kind of relocate anyway. So that is something to keep in mind. When we're talking about just general basic healthcare, you're going to feel a little bit of a difference in the sense of like your walk-in clinic. So your walk-in clinic system is going to be a little bit different. The way we have it here, I'm in St. John, New Brunswick specifically. The way that we have it in St. John, there are a couple clinics around, but it's not if you're used to Ontario, you go to a walk-in clinic, you see the hours, and you just walk in, and you're like, let me be seen. The difference here is they have a phone number that's posted at the door. The door is closed. It'll look like the clinic is entirely closed. But all it is an appointment system. So you can't technically walk in. It's not technically a walk-in clinic. What you would have to do is very early in the morning, maybe a couple hours before they open. I believe the one closest to me opens around 11 or 10 a.m. So what I do is if I need to be seen, I'll wake up at 8. You send a text to the number of the clinic, and then you wait for someone to text you back saying, hey, yeah, we have availability today, or they'll call you back and say, hey, like, you know, what's the reason for you being seen? And then they can fit you in if they have time. So some people really like that system because it's more organized instead of waiting like you do in Ontario, just in a crowded room where people are coughing and sneezing and you just go in at your designated time. But then the other part is they do have a more of a priority system here. So they might just tell you no if there's someone with a higher priority, which means you don't get seen, versus in Ontario, you're already there, you're checked in. If you go early enough, you're going to be seen regardless of what you're there for, right? The other thing too is we do have an emerge. We do have a walk-in emerge in the city as well. One closes at 9 p.m. There's another one that is 24 hours. So that is kind of, to me, that's kind of the downfall with this like priority system with the walk-in clinics. Because, you know, if for me, example, I always have my ear freaking clogged from wax and whatever. And it's just super annoying. I get super dizzy, and it's like, yeah, it's not like a huge medical concern, but I like to be able to walk and drive without being dizzy and things like that. And I just need to go get it like flushed out once in a while. So I feel silly going to an emerge for something like that. You know what I mean? That's something that a walk-in clinic should be able to do. Not to say that you won't be able to do that here, but again, it all depends on the priority of that day. And I think the system can create a little bit of a congestion in the ER and the hospitals that's not needed or necessary as well, right? So that is something to keep in mind. If you're looking to get a family doctor, you are going to be waiting a long time. You're going to be on a wait list for about, well, I think the expectation is like 5 years or something crazy like that. That sounds awful, and it sounds, you know, huge. However, thinking back to when I was in Toronto, I did have a family doctor since I was young. However, to get an appointment, he was always booked 2 weeks to a month out anyway. And if I had something like I fractured my ankle or something that's causing me a lot of pain that I need to be sooner, I would end up just going to a walk-in or the ER if you know, it was unbearable anyway. And then my family doctor would just find out about it after. He might send me for some additional testing. He might not, type of system. So it's really, when I think about it, I was never really seeing the family doctor as much anyway when things came up. But of course, people really, depending on your health and conditions, you might need that family doctor as well. The only other thing that is kind of that I'm adjusting to is I'm someone who I always did my yearly physicals, right? So I want to do my blood work. I want to do my urine testing just to make sure everything's good, even if I have no symptoms. You can still do that. I'm used to just calling my family doctor. He sends out the referral, and it's, you know, easy that way. So if you don't have the family doctor, it's going to be a little bit of a different process, but also not a bad one. So essentially what I use is something called the Maple app, which is just like a telehealth type of thing. You chat with a nurse practitioner. You say, hey, it's been a while since I've done my blood work. This is why I want to go do it. They'll send you a PDF with the requisition, and then you'll print it off. And then what you do is just go to the local lab. The lab for me in St. John, New Brunswick, is in the hospital. So it's just a separate lab they have there. And I went just last week and it was not busy. Very similar system. You take a number, everything else is the same. So yeah, there's just going to be a few different adjustments than you're used to with the healthcare. You know, some people talk really bad about it, like, oh my God, like they're really overwhelmed and they're short staffed. All this is true, but that's true all over Canada. That's true in Toronto. That's true in the West Coast. That's all over Canada right now. That's not just specific to the East Coast. The only thing that is more limited is if you need like a specialist for a specific condition, right? So that's just something you have to keep in mind. What else? That's really it. I mean, for me, those were kind of like the big concerns, right? Was just like healthcare, the isolation part, which I do go back maybe once, twice a year. Actually, it's been last year I went twice, and then this year I went twice. So it's been twice a year going back. So I have a little bit of a balance, but it is definitely hard. No one wants to be away from the people that they grew up with, and it really is sad that Canada has really come to this. You have a lot of people looking to move out and see what their options are in terms of better housing. And that's part of why I wanted to make this video. Hopefully it helps you. If you're in the process of moving, yes, that's what I want to talk about. The other thing was weather. Everybody is just like, are you sure you want to move out there? Because you're going to be snowed in. You don't know what type of snow you're going to get, and you don't know what you're in for, Mel. Like, everyone was going insane with the weather. They think I'm just like in a tornado tunnel all the time, and that's not the case. So this one's a bit tricky because last year my husband and I moved at the on the winter that it was kind of like an off winter for most Canadians. So we had a really light winter last year. We only had 2 bigger snowfalls, which was maybe like an inch of snow each time. So really nothing that I wasn't used to in Ontario that I haven't seen in Toronto. Actually, in fact, I had some friends tell me they had more snow in Toronto than we did here, which was funny. And then this is going to be our second winter that we're going into now, so we'll take a look. But the coldness, there definitely is like a sharper cold when you're out here. Like, it's definitely sharper, but it's not like a lot more cold, if that makes any sense. And that's really just because like we're right by the ocean, right? So even in the summer, what's really, really nice and what I love about St. John is because we're right by the ocean, you're always going to get a cool breeze. We rarely get humidity. Like, that's the one thing that I noticed when I went back home is I was like, oh my God, it's so humid here. And my friends are like, what are you talking about? It's not that humid today. And I'm like, I'm just not used to it anymore. You can feel it right away, which is super, super nice. And yeah, so the highest it gets in the summer is about 25. Very rarely does it go over 25. And if you do have like a muggy day or like a humid day, it's like maybe 1 or 2 days out of the year, which is super nice because in Ontario, in Toronto specifically, I do remember, my hair is in my mic, goddamn. I do remember that, you know, we would go for like a month or 2 sometimes of just really, really muggy weather. Feels like you're melting, feels like you're being suffocated. I haven't had that out here, which is super nice. And I love hoodies. So to just be able to wear a hoodie even in the summer is super nice, for me anyway. So yeah, that's really the weather out here. I haven't seen anything crazy. Last year we did have a hurricane that kind of like we got like the back end of it. So we just had some really strong winds. So that is something that I haven't seen that level of wind in Ontario, and my husband and I did lose, I think, like 23 shingles off the roof. Mind you, our roof was a little bit older. The homes here are also older as well. Um, but who cares? Because you can get like 3,000 square feet of a home for like the 200 to 300,000 range. Um, so yeah, um, be prepared for just like higher winds, things like that. We do have hurricane season, which you need to be aware of. If you're in St. John, we don't really get much of it. If you're going more north, or if you're going to Nova Scotia always gets hit the worst. If you're thinking of going to the Scotia, just know Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, they are the worst when it comes to winters and hurricanes and just really, really bad, scary weather. So that's something to be mindful of as well, which is why my husband and I chose St. John specifically. Yeah, so overall, I don't have any complaints of like the healthcare specifically. I don't have any complaints weather-wise so far. I actually really like the weather. And yeah, I mean, when you're trying to decide if this is a move for you, you just have to look at all the factors. And the other thing to note is you're moving into a place that has a different culture, right? It's not Toronto. Everyone is super nice here. Like, I remember being in Toronto, every time I was just like walking on the street, I would just have my head down, right? Like, I wouldn't even look at people. People would think you're weird if you're looking at them or smiling at them or even just saying hi, good morning, depending on the area. But here, it's almost like the opposite. They think you're rude if you don't walk by and smile or say hi or say good morning, which was an adjustment for me. And but it has been really, really nice. Everybody's super friendly, super welcoming. Um, the other thing I do want to mention and bring up is speaking of culture, when my husband and I first moved here, we did do some research because my husband is part Black. And so I was, we were kind of concerned of like, okay, like we're moving to a predominantly white small city. Um, let's be careful. Let's look into like what kind of incidents have been happening. We didn't really find any. Everyone's been super friendly to him. He hasn't really encountered anything that's like concerning or hasn't had any like racial slurs or anything like that. Um, Funny enough, that would happen more in Toronto than it has here. Thus far, anyway, it's only been 2 years, but no concerns there. Um, for him, the bigger thing is to have the house and a lot more space and also feel safe, right? So he feels all of those things, and there hasn't been like any issues. I know for some people, maybe that are not white, would feel uncomfortable being in an area where it's predominantly white. However, that has changed in the past 2 years as well. Um, from the first year that we moved here, I remember I was shocked because I went to the Tim Hortons and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's like, why is a white person giving me my coffee? Like I just wasn't used to it compared to Toronto, right? Um, and then also we ordered food our first night here, and it was like the DoorDash person's name was like Dave. It was like, Dave is approaching with your order. And I was like, Dave? Okay, Dave. um, so that was when we first moved here. Now everything like the Tim Hortons has changed. The DoorDash employees have changed to very similar to Toronto, and I think that's just because everyone's doing what we kind of did, right? So everyone, oh my god, freaking hair in the mic. So what was I saying? When it comes to culture, things are changing. In St. John, we're seeing a lot more diversity in the city than when we first moved, and that's just because everyone's moving from Ontario because it's just way too expensive. Yeah. So that is my experience thus far. I will do a separate video, just doing like showing different areas, um, as well of St. John. Like we have the beach not far from us. We still have convenience. That's the nice thing about St. John. You have your Canadian Tire, you have your Walmart, you have Sobeys, um, you have Costco, um, you have your PetSmart, your Pet Value. Um, yeah, so you still have your convenience. The other thing that I will mention, and this was more of a pain point for me than it was my husband, I just noticed, is I'm a big foodie. I love my food. And a lot of the food options out here, you still have your Chinese food, your Chinese restaurants, you have your Indian restaurants, you have Italian restaurants. Um, you have Mexican restaurants as well, but a lot of it is primarily like pub or like pub like food. And even with like the Asian restaurant, the Italian restaurant, I do taste the difference. I don't know what it is. And it's not necessarily like bad. It's not like I ate it and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. It was more like, okay, that tastes a little different. And I think what my husband said was, out here it seems like they're just not putting as much like grease and things like that in the food, which would give it that like extra flavor, but at least it's a little better for you at the same time. And I'll just add soy sauce or I'll add whatever, um, if I feel like there's something missing. But of course that varies person to person, um, and things like that. Uh, the other thing that I noticed, which again has already changed in just 2 years, is when I first moved here, there weren't a lot of like international spices. My background is Portuguese, so I was looking for more Portuguese, uh, spices and things like that, like seasonings and oils. And they didn't have too much of it here. They had maybe one or two things, which is okay because it just forces me to learn how to do it myself, which I was trying to do anyway. Um, but that is something that is different. But again, 2 years later, I was at the grocery store and I'm like, oh my gosh, they have this now and they have that now. And that's just because there's more Portuguese people moving to the area as well. So in time, things are changing. The more people that come here, the more restaurants that will open, I hope. That's what I'm hoping, is that people will open up more restaurants and give a little bit more of a variety for food options. The other thing to remember, though, is that you are on the East Coast. If you wanted something more mainstream or whatever, you do have Halifax, you do have Newfoundland you can go to. Like, there's so many places that you can just drive out to that's like maybe a 2 hour ferry ride or a 3 hour car ride, and you just spend the day in Halifax and come back. You have Moncton, you have Fredericton, which has a few more options as well, which is only an hour and 30-minute drive from St. John. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful. If you're thinking of moving to New Brunswick, these are just things that I noticed when I first moved here. If you would like to know anything else or have any questions or would like me to do a video on a specific area, specific neighborhood, I'm happy to go out with my camera and my car, show you the neighborhood. I will be doing that anyway, with just showing you conveniences of plazas and the Costco and the beach and all that as well. But let me know what you think in the comments.